It's for real this time. This time we're actually on. Hello, everybody.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Screen, Alex and Jason. And today I have a special treat for you, Jason, and our viewers. I want to take you guys back in time through the help of my little Mike Myers time machine here. So, and we're going to go back to when I was playing D&D at the age of 16, and that was a really long time ago. So, here's what it looked like, Jason.
Holy cow.
Yeah, when I was 16 and we were playing D&D, you'd craft and draw out all these elaborate maps on your graph paper, and you put it down and you'd number it. And I would take out a spiral bound notebook and I would write, like rooms 1 through 32 for my dungeon, and I would write all these elaborate descriptions for every room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally remember doing this back in the old days. This is the classic blue dungeons, the blue grid dungeon.
Absolutely. And so with the help of our friend Stubborn here, we're going to see this is what it played like with all these long corridors. So basically, you would just be like, you know what, I'm going to check for traps and move 5 spaces. Right. And then everybody in the party would be like, I'm going to check for traps and move 5 spaces.
Like over and over again for the first 3 rounds.
Right. And then the next round would happen, I'm going to check for traps and move 5 spaces. And nothing ever interesting happened until you made it to this first room, right? And then the other bad thing that we did, besides having these long corridors that did nothing, we had these rooms that were super mundane. It's just like, well, what's in room 1? I'm like, well, there you find sleeping bags. That's where the goblins sleep. And invariably somebody'd be like, well, but I want to search. Like, what can I find there? And I'm like, you find more sleeping bags. And then they'd make it to room 2, and they'd be like, well, what's that? And I'm like, oh, well, that's where the goblins eat. You find their cooking pots and this gruel that they're serving. And he's like, well, I want to search. What do I find? And I'm like, well, you find some crusted over bowls. And
table and chairs and 2 coins.
Right. As players try to generate their own fun, because frankly, it's a failing on the part of the DM, you're not giving them fun. What's really fun in this? The fun is trying to find the prisoners that the goblins have captured and facing off against the goblin mage, right? So why are we spending our time on where they sleep and where they eat? And why are we spending time in these long corridors? We need to skip over those parts. So as a DM, what I recommend you do is focus on the 2 or 3 rooms that matter. Focus on the room where the captives are being held, and then focus on the room where you fight the goblin mage. Right. That's really the most interesting parts, right? And so in terms of all those transitions and all that mundane stuff, what I would say is cut it out. Just stop it. Okay? And focus on these spaces. What does that look like? It looks like this. Here's the room where the prisoners are. So I'm going to take all those long corridors and I'm going to completely omit them. Okay? It's what my son calls skipping the commute. Okay? We're going to skip the commute, all the lead up to get here to where Stubborn's going to go to work, right? And so when he rolls in this room, he's going to find these 3, people tied up to pillars. They're all dirty and disheveled. Looks like they've been tortured. There's going to be this 2-round timer going on because the goblin reinforcements are going to be on their way in 2 rounds. Like he knows somebody's going to come check on these prisoners. And now this sets up some interesting role playing with the captives, trying to get them freed in time. If the goblins show up, suddenly you've got a fight going on. And frankly, all of that's going to be way more interesting and way more satisfying than going through those tunnels and then Stubborn checking in on all these mundane rooms where there's really nothing going on.
Right. I absolutely agree. I mean, this you're taking the mundane out of it, you're putting it in a discrete space, and you're doing the threat and the timer and putting pressure on the players to react. Instead of having to slog your way through a bunch of halls. So, important question though, right? Because somebody's going to ask this.
Yep.
What if I want to run an encounter in a corridor?
Oh, good question. So here's a sample of what that might look like, right? So again, my first point would be think in discrete spaces. That's number 1. So if something really interesting is going to happen to Stubborn in a corridor, just make it a discrete space, kind of like it is here. So I've represented this corridor. It's now a discrete space, or a room, as we call it in ICRPG terms. Here are some threats for him to face. He's got a door at this other end he has to get to.
Right.
Maybe these rocks are falling, and he's got 2 rounds, either before the tunnel caves in, or more reinforcements show up, or a trap spring, or whatever. We can talk about all that in another video. But the point is, if something interesting is going to happen during the commute, so to speak, then absolutely you can just showcase it as a discrete space and move on. But do not give your players these kind of old school mundane corridors. Frankly, you just need to skip over those spots.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only time I have these kinds of encounters in my games are when I'm worried that I might run short, so I have something to kind of drop in and add a little extra, pressure.
Absolutely.
Before the big finale, before the last room.
Well, yeah, right. And so I look at it like your favorite TV show, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or whatever. We don't watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She gets up out of bed, brushes her teeth, uses the bathroom, fixes coffee, gets behind the wheel of the car, and then drives to the park. We jump right in terms of the show at the moment where she arrives at the park and the vampires are rolling up on her, right?
Yeah, and that's a great analogy. That's perfect. That's the best way to look at it.
Absolutely. And that's the type of experience you want to give to your players. So let's take this back to the campaign and in terms of how it played out. And if you remember, right after the party saved Sarah Westberg here, they had to do something with her. She starts pleading with them, please, you've got to find my sisters. They're being held captive in Duke Harold's mansion. It's up on the hill. You've got to climb, up to the hill and go through the forest, and it's up there, and they're being tortured. And I fear they may have little time left.
Right.
Right. And the only other landmark that I described for the party was this tavern here to the east. And somebody said, I think, well, maybe we could just drop her off at the tavern. And I'm like, you know what? The tavern is great. It turns out the people inside are really good people. She knows them. And she's safe. And everybody's like, yeah, we want to charge up the hill to the mansion. And I'm like, well, is it the case? You just want to leave her at the tavern. And they're like, yeah, let's just leave her at the tavern.
Yes.
And so what you can see is I could have mapped out, all the way up to the mansion. I could have done a room for the tavern. And in fact, frankly, Jason, I did. But here's the deal. There's no timer in this tavern. There's nothing really exciting going on except maybe some role play. And the reality is the way we handled it, this kind of mundane sort of scene, was way better. Because what we did instead is we just glossed over it in 2 or 3 sentences like, hey, let's just head straight to the mansion. And that's what we did. We skipped that whole mundane piece. Right?
And that's super valuable, because the takeaway I got from there is that the way you handled that made it work that way. Is you just straight up asked, is it the case that you wish to do this? And then you immediately hand waved, okay, she's dropped off, let's go.
Right, exactly. I made it up to the players, and they said, yeah, we want to drop her off and head on to take out Duke Harold. And I'm like, money, we'll press.
Yeah.
So here's the other piece. So I could have mapped out, right, the path leading from the town all the way up through the woods, up the hill to the mansion, but I didn't do that. I skipped the commute. And the way that I handle that is I just immediately took the players to this picture of this dark mansion and started to describe it. Like, you made your way up the hill and you find yourselves at this mansion, and the dark boards and the gargoyles, and it's grotesque and evil looking, and the wrought iron and blah, 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 blah. And instantly put the players right in this scene. So we skip over commute. We skip over more of the mundane. And frankly, the way I did this here is I just dropped this picture. You can do this live on a table. You can definitely do it here on a virtual tabletop. Just take the party to a picture of the scene you're describing and use theater of the mind to really kind of move your way past a lot of those details. Kind of like moving your way past those corridors in the dungeon. Like, hey, rough-hewn corridors, and now you're in a room. Boom. Same thing here. You've left the town. Now you're at the mansion. Boom. And we're bypassing all of that stuff that causes games to really grind. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's a super pro tip. I mean, just about everybody's got a tablet or a phone these days. There's nothing wrong with having some photos just set up on your phone that you can flash to the players. Like, this is what you see, and then move on.
Absolutely. All right. And then, so my last point today, Jason, is this. So in terms of We've skipped the commute. The party has now arrived at Duke Harold's mansion. And what you can see is that Duke Harold's mansion consists of 3, really kind of 4 if you count the sub-basement, really small, defined, discrete spaces. And the party instantly goes in the front door. They jump right into the living room where they encounter some guards, and they instantly have to fight with the guards, these witch hunters and their captain. But I'm skipping and I'm leaving out a bunch of mundane spaces. For example, you may be asking, where does Duke Harold sleep? Notice I did not include his bedroom.
Yep.
How does Duke Harold eat? Does he have a kitchen? Does he even own a skillet? Frankly, nobody cares. Is it the case, Jason? Did anybody notice that we did not cover a bedroom or a kitchen?
No, I never even thought about it before. And you're right. Like even in that photo, like where's the second story?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But for sure, none of that mundane stuff is included. We have this greeting hall where his guards are. We have the basement here where the 2 girls are chained up, and that's really where the party's trying to get to, right? In terms of the action, they've got to save these girls. I want to get the party there as fast as possible and not spend time on mundane stuff that's going to bog us down. We also have Duke Harold's study where you can loot some gear, you can ransack his papers, which kind of leads to maybe our topic for next week, which is player choices and how they maybe kind of define your campaign or move it in a different direction you didn't expect.
Right.
But that's it. That's all I included because, to recap, all right, I want to think in discrete spaces. I only want those scenes or those spaces that matter and move the story and the action forward. 2, I'm going to skip the commute. So any long corridors, any long paths, anything that's going to take away from the action and these awesome scenes I have planned out, we're going to skip them. We're going to jump over that detail, or we're going to theater the mind it really fast. We're going to deal with it in just a few sentences and descriptions and move on. And then finally, I'm going to leave out the mundane. Who cares about the kitchen? Who cares about the bedroom? Who cares about these spaces that don't really drive the story forward?
Absolutely. I mean, those are all details conspiring to slow down your game. You know, and make players whip out their phones and go to sleep on you.
Yep. And so those are my 3 simple tips.
Perfect.
And that's all we have for this week.
I love it. Okay, well, we're going to be back again on our next topic, which was, again...
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about player choices and how they kind of drive your campaign, and maybe we even talk about unexpected player choices and how to deal with that as a DM.
I love it. This is an absolute great series. Thank you so much, Alex, for putting this together. Thank you, everybody, if you're still watching. We appreciate you. You know, if this is helpful to you, share it with any of your other DM friends or players that you know or might be interested in DMing. And thank you again. Hope you have a wonderful day and happy gaming.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Oh man, the credit.